This is a CBC podcast. If you have an iPad, iPhone, or iPod Touch, be sure to download the latest version of the updated CBC radio app. You can hear live streams and on-demand audio from more than 60 of CBC's most popular programs. Multitask on your device and still hear that great CBC sound. Find it at cbc.ca/iTunes.
Hello, I'm Matthew Lazenrider, and this is The Invisible Hand. It's a show about economics, and that, on a basic level, is the study of how people make choices. Choices about how to spend their resources, their capital, their labor, and their time. And yes, even their love. For a long time, economic models of marriage and relationships treated these romantic partnerships like business partnerships. It was all about division of labor and maximizing productivity. It was a decidedly unemotional equation for marital success. But today, some economists are rooting for romance and falling in love with love.
What light from yonder window breaks?
You might think the era of ardent devotion had its final curtain call in the days of Shakespeare. Or that romance ran its course in the time of the Brontes.
Heathcliff, why don't you run away? You could come back to me rich and take me away.
Kathy, come with me now.
Where?
Anywhere.
Oh, Heathcliff. Yes, you might think that today's propensity for online hookups and texting and sexting has pretty much killed courting. But today, some economists say that we are living right now in one of the most romantic times in history. Stay with us. We think you're going to find today's episode of The Invisible Hand very engaging.
I'd had like a low breakup and I was working with this girl and she was like, oh, I'll set you up with someone, and she was trying to think of who, and then I was making like a really dumb joke one day and she was like, oh my god, you should totally meet my friend Max. Was it okay that I said that?
I don't know, we really hit it off. I really liked hanging out with her and it was exciting. I was really nervous, which is always a good sign at the beginning.
Yeah,
and
our first
Meet Max Stockholder and Vanessa Mell. They got engaged about 3 months ago. The way they got together is pretty much the stuff of fairy tale romance. Fair maiden meets Prince Charming, he makes her laugh, she gives him butterflies. Soon, like in a storybook, they fall in love.
Like, I know he would be an amazing father and our child would be this.
We'll get to know Max and Vanessa more throughout the show, but for now, we'll let them get back to planning their wedding. And here's some advice, guys. Be careful about who you put on your guest list. Check out these two.
Justin and I always joke that we're terrible guests at a wedding because when people get up there and they exchange vows, what Justin and I are listening for is, well, this is the time they're contracting. What matters to this couple?
When you hang out with economists long enough, you learn to see economics everywhere. So that can make us some of the most boring people to hang out with.
Time to meet another couple with some thoughts to share on love and marriage.
I'm Betsey Stevenson. I'm a visiting assistant professor of economics at Princeton.
And I'm Justin Wolfers. I'm also visiting Princeton right now. I'm an economics professor and also a fellow of the Brookings Institution.
And you're married?
Nearly.
We're partnered.
You're partnered?
We're significantly othered.
These labor economists aren't just partnered in life. They're significantly othered at work, too. They've co-written numerous papers about marriage, divorce, and relationships. Their work is cited by academics and policymakers all over North America, so little wonder they see economics at work everywhere, even in their own relationship.
So when our daughter was born, we decided that Betsey would do... Betsey had a different technology than I did. I think they call her breasts. So we decided she would do inputs. If she's doing inputs, then I guess I had to do outputs. So I was changing all my daughter's diapers.
Justin couldn't nurse our daughter. So obviously, that's very clear. That's a great example of absolute advantage.
Let's face it. It's talk like that has earned economists their reputation as being less than lovey-dovey. So you might be surprised that this couple's work is helping to articulate a modern view of romantic relationships that's, well, pretty darn romantic.
What I think really matters is finding someone who has the same vision for how they're going to live their life as you have.
Yes, by the time we reach our final chapter here today, we'll tell you how these two are rewriting the old school ideas of once upon a time and making romance the key for an economic happily ever after. Time to turn the page in our storybook romance now and take a look at why and how economists would even tackle an idea like romantic relationships.
Well, economics isn't the most romantic field, and I don't think they're going to be writing any love songs about economic theory anytime in the future, but I consider myself a diehard romantic.
This diehard romantic and economist is Marina Adshade. She teaches at Dalhousie University in Halifax. She has a blog about the economics of sex and love called Dollars and Sex, and she's just about to release a book on the subject too.
Sometimes people will say to me, it's only love that matters. As long as two people love each other, what difference does it make what their education levels are or what their income is, their family background, all of these things that economists can measure. And while that's possibly true, the job of an economist is not really to tell people what their relationships should be like, but more to observe what the relationships actually are like, and then come to theories that explain how people match.
And how people match isn't just important in individual relationships. It affects government tax laws, workplace regulations, healthcare funding decisions, and so
I think it's actually very useful to think about those topics from the perspective of an economist. There are policy implications that people should be paying attention to in terms of relationships and economics. And that goes basically not from cradle, but practically cradle to the grave.
All right, so we know why economists want to get their hands on marriage and relationships. Let's take a look at some of the ways they see economics at play in the game of love. Or as some economists call it, the marketplace. We're standing in the lineup to get into the Roxy, a local entertainment magazine called this Vancouver nightclub the city's best pickup bar, or as some people refer to it,
meat market, hands down.
Meat market.
Okay.
Meat market.
So they called it a market, but ask the patrons here if they're thinking about economics. They'd probably tell you no, but supply and demand is clearly what makes this place their number one stop.
I just saw a lot of cute girls lined up. There was like 20 girls, and I'm not gonna lie, I followed them. I saw where they were going.
You get like hockey players, you get businessmen.
See the honeys walk in there? It's insane.
Lots of hot guys.
There's lots of girls that are wearing skimpy clothes.
Man, it's so loud. Let's get out of here. This is not my scene, man. All right, so that gives you a simple example of how economists might see market forces at work as people pick a partner for a dance or a drink. But what if you want something a little more meaningful than honeys, hotties, and skimpy outfits? Could economics play a role in the search for more lasting love? Cherie Morgan would say yes. I should clarify, she's not an economist, she's a matchmaker. Her customers shell out more than $7,500 to have her play Cupid. But she's seen it all in her line of work, even the economic principle of comparative advantage. It came up when she described one of her clients for us.
Well, he had built 4 businesses, and he said, I'm really good at building the business, but I'm not really good at everything. I've learned the things I'm good at, and anybody else, I get the best person for. So I get the best lawyer, I get the best salesperson, I get the best advertising person. So my personal life is the most important part of my life. He said it just stands to reason that I would get the best person I can to find me the best possible match.
So how is that economics at work? Well, here's the definition of comparative advantage, one of the most powerful concepts in economics.
Comparative advantage. The ability of an individual or group to carry out a particular economic activity, such as making a specific product, more efficiently than another activity.
In our matchmaking example, it's not that Cherie's client lacks the ability to find a girlfriend, it's just that he's better at earning the money to pay Cherie to do it. And she's better at carrying out the activity of finding him a perfect match. In market terms, hiring her will maximize his chances at love. Economists couldn't talk about a true marketplace without talking about its efficiency. But surely that can't be a major principle in the search for modern love, can it?
Yeah, when Jolene goes to her yoga every morning and evening, I get a tingle notification about her yoga session.
Ian Bell has just launched a new dating app for your smartphone. Sign up and it will notify you when a potential love match is close by. Ian used to use online dating sites, but says that took too much of an investment of his time.
So there's this process, right? You meet a girl on an online dating site. She's got 75 other messages that day from total strangers she's never met before. If you charm her via 3 or 4 messages back and forth on Hotmail, then she'll give you her phone number. Then you'll have a couple of calls. Then you'll arrange for a date. And this is a multi-week process that involves a lot of inconvenience and time. So in designing Tingle, we really wanted to increase the efficiency of the time that people spend both triaging potential matches and communicating with people as they're getting to know them.
Efficiency, comparative advantage, all pretty clinical terms to apply when you're looking for love. But don't be brokenhearted. It's just about time to see how love really will conquer all in the fairy tale romance between marriage and economics. I'm Matthew Lazenrider. Glad you can spend some time with me here on The Invisible Hand today. You know, work on our relationship a bit. If you'd like to get to know us a bit better, check out all our vital statistics online at cbc.ca/theinvisiblehand. So in theory, you can see how economists might see relationships in terms of economic transactions. But we've got a real-life couple contemplating a future together here. Let's check back in with our newly engaged lovebirds to see how economics might play a role in their marriage. When we last visited, Max Stockholder and Vanessa Mell were telling us about how they met and fell in love.
Our first real date was at the foundation, and it was so loud. The music was so loud, and we couldn't hear each other at all, and he was so nervous. He was like so nervous.
Even though they couldn't hear each other, the language of love spoke to them loud and clear. Max and Vanessa moved in, and their relationship grew even stronger.
And I think we're super compatible in our personalities and our interests and our values and our political beliefs, and all that is just so compatible.
So you'll notice this love story hasn't yet included any discussion about comparative advantages or opportunity costs, but the kids seem to be doing all right. Let's see if our other couple, the expert economists, have any advice that can keep all of this positive momentum going.
I think that people don't necessarily see economists and think that's the person who's going to give me great marital advice.
Betsey Stevenson and Justin Wolfers may not hand out advice to individual couples, but they say a good grasp of economics can help keep things running smoothly in the marriage department.
What you're trying to do is live, your best life ever. Really, that's what economics is all about, trying to live our best life ever. So absolutely applying economics to your marriage, to raising children, to your job choices, I think will end up leading you to make better decisions.
One of the things I can say about Betsey and I is we argue like other couples do, but we argue very efficiently. And maybe that's what economics gives us. We have a shared language, and it's a language that helps us get to the heart of the trade-offs that often underlie conflict. And so we can get to that. We then have a shared language and value system for thinking about costs and benefits. And as a result, we can resolve conflict, I think, a lot more directly than many other couples can.
I bet Max and Vanessa never argue. They're still in the pre-honeymoon phase, after all. Oh, what's that, Max?
Yeah, I always do the dishes.
Yeah.
And Vanessa doesn't do the dishes, and I see that as like the hardest job in the house. So I always thought that I'm doing all the dishes. Like what?
It's true, and I actually think that's really, I hate doing the dishes, so I'm happy about that, but I guess I just always think that that's what adults do. They do the dishes, and that shouldn't really count.
Oh no, marital discord! Quick, is there an economic principle we can apply here to restore peace in our lovebirds' happy home? Here again is economist Betsey Stevenson.
Preferences can play a role here as well. So how much you like or dislike doing something relative to another thing actually has an impact on how costly it is for you to do it. It turns out that I like to manage the money more than I like to figure out how to get the router working properly. And the opposite is true for Justin. So our preferences also end up shaping our comparative advantage.
Okay then, let's try out Betsey and Justin's theory that economics can help you resolve your arguments more efficiently. We'll apply their idea to Max and Vanessa's debate about who should do the dishes. The trick is to find Vanessa's comparative advantage keeping preferences in mind. Suppose Max is way better at sweeping the floor than Vanessa, but Vanessa doesn't mind sweeping the floor as much as she dislikes doing dishes. Then Vanessa has a comparative advantage in sweeping the floor, even though Max is overall a better sweeper. As long as he does dishes and she sweeps, they're both better off.
Rinse it after I've done that. It's very important. Vanessa's got like a real aversion to doing the dishes. It's like the one thing that she like can't do and it freaks her out. And this is my chance to be like a knight in shining armor and come in and do the dishes. And it usually, it makes her really happy.
Well, that might work in one couple's kitchen, but how does economics get us any closer to living in the most romantic era ever? To answer that, we have to find out why some economists used to have such a business-like view of marriage. Then we can see how the work of people like Betsey and Justin have helped turn those things around. We start, as always, with Once Upon a Time.
If you look back at marriages of our grandparents' generation, the marriages that formed in the 50s or even earlier, these are really marriages where the main benefit came from specialization in the household and came from the sort of idea of separate spheres. So you had women who concentrated on making a home and men who concentrated on earning the income necessary to support that home.
And it's really worth emphasizing here, being a housewife used to be a very difficult, technically demanding job. And that's why a couple would have one of the two of them specialize in doing it.
So when economists started looking at marriage as we know it in North America, many of them used corporations and firms as a model. They applied the kind of economics you'd see in production partnerships. You needed someone with your opposite set of skills to maximize your production. Make sense so far, Max? Vanessa?
Yeah, like I think about this all the time. Like if I think about us, our relationship existing in the 1950s, I mean, in some ways, it would be so much more harmonious because I wouldn't be like, oh, Max needs to do the dishes more. It would just be like, oh, that would be my job, you know? And
I would bring home the bacon. It would be awesome.
Yeah.
I could just come home from work and sit in my chair, and it'd be awesome.
Oh, slow down there, Ward and June. Let's see what happens in the next chapter of our story about love and economics. After the 50s, there were medical advances, meaning women had more choice about when and if to have children, and when or if to go to work outside the home. And of course, there were advances in technology.
Washing machines, you push a button. The dryer, the microwave oven. Betsey and I use a Roomba to do our vacuuming now. It's just so simple, even I know how to use it. And as a result, there's no need for a household to have a specialist who focuses on just those tasks. My mother used to cook a lot. My household still employs a cook. It's the Trader Joe's freezer.
Right, and so that's the sense in which both technological change and the development of markets has crowded out some of the returns to having that specialist in the home. Now, if that was the end of the story, what we might expect to see is just fewer marriages, fewer partnerships. But instead, what we've seen is a shift into a different type of marriage, a different type of partnership. And these are ones where the benefits come not from being more productive as a unit, but actually from having a better time, frankly, from enjoying shared consumption, enjoying shared vacations, enjoying the shared joy of raising children together. You're seeing parents who spend time with their kids and their spouse. So everybody goes to the soccer game because it's not just work, it's leisure.
These economic and social forces started to result in a fundamental change in relationships. And this, folks, is how our story today turns from economic textbook to romance novel. This is why we are now living in the most romantic era for relationships ever. Instead of looking for someone who is opposite to you, so you can split up the labor needed to maintain a household, now to make the most economically advantageous marriage, you should be looking for someone you are totally compatible with. Economists like Betsey and Justin say that you should find someone you actually want to spend time with, not that you have to spend time with to get all the work done. Max and Vanessa have now put this new economic insight to work. They went from arguing about the division of labor to maximizing their most valuable resource, their quality time together. Right, guys?
Like, we only fight about a couple things, and that was it. And then that was no fun, because that was like the only, like, we'd only have like a day together, free time, and then it was like, oh, we have to spend it cleaning, and then
we got a cleaning lady, which helps a lot, and that's actually improved our relationship like tenfold.
Yeah. I mean, I think it does work pretty well, and having someone come in and thoroughly clean our house every 2 weeks really helps.
It does, a lot.
And it does, because you can now spend that one day a week doing things you love with the one you love. Betsey and Justin, our life partner, work partner, labor economists, say the shift into these new, more equal relationships caused a lot of growing pains.
My grandparents got married understanding they'd live in this old style of marriage where he would go to work and she would stay at home and they'd live in these separate spheres. My mother's generation got married expecting the old style of marriage, and then the world changed through the 1970s. She went off to work. She found herself, and her generation found themselves with the wrong partner for the new form of marriage. And so that's why those who got married in the 1970s, they were what we call the greatest divorcing generation. And so that old statistic that, maybe as many as 1 in 2 marriages ended in divorce was true for that generation. What we've seen over the next few decades is we're now matching with the right partner for modern marriage, and divorce rates are plummeting.
In fact, what has been really sort of the revolutionary change is this change to marriages that are based on love or soulmates. The reason we're moving towards love is because these old reasons for marrying, political allegiances, specialization within the household, these things have become less valuable today, and something else has become more valuable, finding someone who you really like to go to the movies with.
Our happy couple, Max and Vanessa, should be even happier about that. They love to go to the movies together, and now they've got just the motivation they need to share even more pastimes in common.
One of my New Year's resolutions was try to get Vanessa to teach me how to sew. Mm-hmm. I've tried knitting before. I've always wanted to be able to watch TV and knit at the same time. And I tried it once and discovered that it is actually quite challenging. And you can't really focus on the television, because part of the fantasy was the television. So it didn't really go very far because of that.
How does that make you feel, hear Max talk about that he would like to kind of join your interests like that?
I think it's awesome. I'd be super excited. I mean, I was sewing. We went to a wedding last weekend, and I was sewing on buttons onto Max's pants at like 1 a.m, cursing the fact that I was doing that. So, I mean, for practical reasons, it'd be awesome. But I also, I don't know, I envision, I want us to live this life of craftiness and making our own stuff, and hearing him say that, I think it's really cool that would be something we could enjoy together.
Well, that sounds pretty romantic and economically sound. Too bad those economists, Betsey and Justin, aren't in the game of giving marital advice all the time.
I mean, when we're at a cocktail party, if you come up and ask us for advice about your marriage, I'll probably wander off to the bar and get another drink. When policymakers wander up to us and talk about how we can design better social policies, that's what this sort of research is all about informing.
When you're moving into a world where marriages, the strongest marriages are potentially the ones that are most equal and based on shared roles, then it is really important that we have policies in place that give both parents the opportunity to leave work to pick up a sick child, to make sure they can get to daycare on time. So having things like paid leave available, those things do seem to strengthen marriages, because they're not putting all the burden on one spouse and trying to force people into these specialization marriages when the marriages of equality are becoming so much more important to people's lives.
And economists like these say when marriages of equality became more important, it meant policies also had to change about who could legally get hitched.
This is an historic political and cultural moment in this country, and the issue, gay marriage.
I think same-sex couples should be able to get married.
So think about the old model of marriage. Husband and wife were in separate spheres. And that may well have described the 1950s heterosexual marriages very well, but it hasn't described gay marriages at all well. And equally, the sorts of relationships that our grandparents were engaged in were not a form that were particularly attractive to gays and lesbians. And so as marriage has evolved into shared consumption, hedonic marriage, it's become more attractive for gays and lesbians. And so that presumably is one of the reasons why the gay and lesbian community have chosen to spend some of their scarce political capital pushing for gay marriage rather than pushing for anything else. And it also presumably explains how people of our generation understand their relationships. Their relationships look a lot like ours, and of course they want recognition for them.
No matter what your gender or the gender of your spouse, this modern economic view of marriage says the roles of men and women are now up to individual couples to define for themselves. That's something our bride-to-be Vanessa and her soon-to-be hubby Max have already been thinking about.
Certain things haven't caught up. Like, I don't know that men are trained as children to do chores in the same way women are. So you have this really tough situation where all of a sudden a man is expected in the relationship to like do this task that maybe they're haven't been prepared for at the same level. And it's interesting thinking about, like, we talk sometimes about Max staying home with a kid. I'm like, but I know how to do it all, and maybe you don't, and how would that work? Like,
yeah, actually, realistically, I would love to stay home with a kid. Like, I've always thought that being a housewife would be like one of the most rewarding tasks ever. Like, you get to be there with your kid at the beginning of its life. So to be able to develop this amazing personal relationship would be amazing.
So Max and Vanessa, feel free to knit and sew and divide up those child-rearing duties any way you want. Economically speaking, you've already maximized your choice of spouse. You've found the person you're most compatible with when it comes to consuming your most valuable resource, your quality time together. When economists like Betsey Stevenson and Justin Wolfers look at the marriage market of today, they see people just like you, people unfettered by the obligations that defined our romances in the days of Romeo and Juliet and Cathy and Heathcliff. Gone are the days of seeing a marriage like a production firm. So Max and Vanessa, by 2013, when you get married, remember that you're smack dab in the middle of the most romantic economic era of marriage ever. And everyone, including the invisible hand, lived happily ever after. We close the book on this week's show, but we'll be back next week. If you can't possibly live without us for 7 lonely days, head over to our webpage and download our podcast. And to help you while away the hours till next we meet, we've posted links to articles on all the economic issues we've been passionately debating around the office. You'll find us at cbc.ca/The Invisible Hand. You can also stay connected by following us on Twitter at CBC The Hand. Our producer is Jeff Turner, our economic consultant is Stephen Gordon, and our senior producer is Karen Burgess. I'm Matthew Lazenrider, riding off on my white steed into the sunset.
Looking for more CBC podcasts? Go to cbc.ca/podcasting.